Okay, so this first video is going to be about introducing myself and a bit about my work and what the videos on this channel will be about. So my name is Tio and I'm presently streaming from the jungle of Brazil. I was born and brought up in uh, Bombay, India, and lived there for a long time before I moved to the US to do a master's in information security. And following that, I worked as a software developer and security consultant at Amazon. And 2.5 years into my corporate job, I went for an ayahuasca retreat, not intentionally. I went intentionally, but not with the intention that it resulted in, which was a very life changing experience. But my original intention to go there was out, there was a different plan. So, as it turns out, there was a different plan in store for me. Not so much as in destiny, but a new, a different choice was given to me, and I decided to take that choice and go with it. And so I came back to this retreat as a volunteer to give it a shot and see how life would be living in the jungles of Brazil as an ayahuasca retreat volunteer. And eventually I transitioned. So it went very well, and I decided to quit my job and come and do this full time. And I transitioned into the role of an assistant facilitator. So I apprenticed as an assistant ayahuasca retreat facilitator for uh, about 5.5 years, a bit more than that. And while it may sound like the stereotypical story of someone who took psychedelics and gave up everything to go and live in the jungle, my story was not that stereotypical because I maintained one foot in each reality. So I did not really give up everything because I had a virtual job uh, or a job that is capable of being done virtually or remotely. I continued working as a software developer, as a freelancer sometimes and on contract sometimes, and also apprenticing as a retreat and ceremony facilitator. And this helped me to keep balance in a great way because I did not really go off the deep end. And the other thing is that although I was born into a family that identifies as Hindu, I never really bought into the story of religion, and I was always skeptical and doubtful and atheistic, atheist for most of my life. So at the age of 10, I really started uh, openly rejecting the religion narrative and started identifying as atheist. And when I came to ayahuasca, that was challenged definitely because I started having experiences which are defined classically as divine experiences, spiritual experiences, and for a moment, for a long moment, I was taken into that and I explored it without reservation, without judgment, and truly explored it by immersing myself in it. At the same time, while the skeptic took a back seat, it never really went away. And when I had explored and immersed myself in it deep enough, the skeptic returned. And this time, what happened is that I started to have more balance because I had explored the spiritual divine narrative from a very deeply immersed perspective, not just as an outsider, but truly believing it for myself. At the same time, when my skeptic came back, I started realizing that it was belief that uh, made me have the experiences. It's not as easy to say that belief played a huge role in it, uh, but it was not the only role. I do believe that these realities exist, but they are not the entire fabric of reality. They are one container which we can choose to buy into. And this is my opinion why there are so many containers of religion, because you have the capability of tuning into several different containers. And belief, in my opinion, is what allows you to tune into a very specific container. And atheism or science itself is a container. I don't believe it to be the totality of reality. I don't believe any system that exists today to be total or complete in its way of being. And this brings me to one of the core topics, which is consciousness nomadism, which is a term that I came up with, but the ideology, the philosophy, the lifestyle behind it is not really mine. I just am bringing it to the world, but I do not believe in thought ownership in the way people believe in it, in the sense that I don't believe that thoughts are generated in the brain. Rather, my opinion is that the brain is more like a receiver or a radio or something which allows us to tune into different. If you want to think of it like a radio, then it would be frequencies. So you know how you have radio channels, uh, and using that knob or button or digit. Since we are digital nowadays, using a button, you can change the channel. I believe that our brain, and along with that consciousness and the brain between, which is belief, using these three things, we can tune into different containers of or systems of belief. So the greater religious narratives we are already aware of, they have, some of them have an umbrella, and then there are narratives within narratives, or divisions. So you may have the larger umbrella of Buddhism, but within Buddhism there are two main streams of Buddhism, and then there are several substreams of Buddhism. And the same goes with, I think what they're called is Abrahamic religions. So I'm not really great with religious context. Even in Hinduism, I know that there are tons and tons of uh, substreams which come under the big umbrella of Hinduism. So all this to say that while there are these big umbrellas, each with their, I believe that these umbrellas are more like containers, and using belief and intention, we can tune into a specific container. And once we tune into that container, we enter into that stream of consciousness, and that stream starts encoding our lives. And the deeper we go into that stream, the more real it starts feeling, because our beliefs start reinforcing our reality. And I believe the same to be with science. I don't believe science to be as objective as scientists think it is. But science itself has a lot of belief associated with it. Great desire to bridge physical reality, or prove things in physical reality, but not all science has to do with physical reality. A lot of people try to conduct objective experiments on very subjective things, and that is where I believe that science stops being science and starts becoming something else. So I am kind of separating again science into a large container and several small containers, where you may have smaller containers which can be more objective and more tied to physical reality. But again, physical reality is not really the totality of reality, it's just believe it to be the only reality doesn't make it the only reality. It just makes it our experience and our belief of what reality is. So coming back to Comadism, which is a short way of saying consciousness nomadism, Comadism is the idea that we don't actually is. So the reason of using nomadism is because of the original connotation where you are a wanderer. You do not really have a fixed uh, location, but more like you are wandering and you make stops at different places. And like the gypsies, where you give something when you stop and you take something when you stop. And if you would decide how long you want to live at a specific stop point. But consciousness nomadism is not simply about physical movement. It's more about the flexibility of consciousness. It's about being able to explore consciousness without belonging to a specific system or without fixating on a specific system. And that is a is the most simple definition of it. So as I described the containers, the idea of consciousness nomadism would be that you do not belong to a container, so you do not identify as one specific ideology, but you have the flexibility to move between containers and immerse yourself as deep that as well. So consciousness nomadism is closely related to another concept which I will talk only briefly. Beep boop 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 boop. Okay, we're back. So I will only talk about this briefly right now. It's an associated concept which I will go into more depth later on. So consciousness nomadism is closely related to the phenomenon or the idea of faceless beings. From my experiences, I have encountered a realm which is called the realm of faceless beings, and the beings that are from this realm, uh, the way they present themselves as faceless, the idea is that you are more than your identity, you are more than your personality, and it's about knowing yourself beyond the surface. It's about knowing and knowing yourself beyond the surface and connecting with others beyond the surface. So faceless beings, the realm of faceless beings is about connecting beyond identity, is about connecting at the level that does not simply fixate on appearances and presentation and uh, ephemeral things such as beliefs and reality, but it connects beyond who we are today. It's about connecting beyond slices of time and connecting with yourself and connecting with others. So, this is also a good time to briefly talk about a community that I am helping to build, which is a community of individuals, community of Comads, where people are coming together to support each other and to connect beyond identity. And one of the big parts of this, big ideas of this community is that we do not just change once in our lives. We do not just have one spiritual awakening and then we are just this new spiritual fixated person for the rest of our lives. In my experience, the when you start discovering yourself, whether you do it consciously or unconsciously, as you move through life, you transform many times. And if the connections that you build are simply based on your identity as you are today or in a specific period of time, those connections are not really going to cross over that bridge once your identity transforms, once you change. There will be this loss of connection because the people may not really want to connect with who you are becoming. And this is what I see as the fundamental problem of change, is that people are afraid of losing out the connections that they have. And I do believe that it is part of growing up into an individual is learning to separate, is learning to lose, whether it is something physical or something social. It's learning to lose something is part of growing up. So I don't think it's inevitable that you will lose people in your life, but I believe that if we create a space where we come directly from the point of connecting beyond identity, if we can create a platform, a container, not a shapeful or formful container, but a shapeless, amorphous container which allows people to expand and explore themselves and develop themselves and change constantly, and to still be there for each other through change, not just through one change, but through as many changes as you go through. This fluid container, I believe, is a way for people to connect as faceless beings, as comads, as individuals, because we are connecting at the level that is beyond the surface, that is beyond identity, that is beyond personality, because these things keep changing. And if we stay fixated on something that someone expressed today, some way that someone behaved today, and we choose to disconnect from them because of this, we are going to end up very, very lonely. And this is one of the things that has been lost in the digital age. One of the big things of traditional communities was that while there was this feeling of imprisonment in a very specific ideology, what allowed people to connect was that you had to stay with the tribe in order to survive. You had to stay with the community in order to survive. And while there was this compulsive nature about it, that the way you belong is by believing in the same thing, we have the potential today to break that limitation. We do not need to be associated or connected just based on what we believe, but we have the capability of connecting at a much deeper level, and to acknowledge diversity, and to acknowledge that we are at different phases and different stages in our life. So, this I feel is a good place to close the intro. Uh, there will be a lot more coming. There's a lot more to talk about these concepts. But if you are interested in participating in such a community, whether it is just as a member, a participant, a viewer, or even a community builder, and you do not have to completely resonate with this idea. The idea of this container is just a very amorphous container within which there can be countless micro containers where each person can express themselves and find other people who may resonate with part of it, all of it, keep changing, to build a container that is fluid and amorphous. So if you are interested in participating in this, let's call it an experiment, let's call it something to play with. If you want to come in and play and build this together, then you can go to theinfinitezero.com or find some more details in the description of this video on how to connect to to start building this space together. And I look forward to meeting with you if you resonate with these ideas. See you on the other side.